Aquatic, Molecule 01, Terre d'Hermès, some of the most popular fragrances in men's perfumery that have become many of our favorites. But how do these fragrances end up becoming so famous in the first place? Did they just come out of nowhere in a vacuum? The answer is no. They had predecessors that changed the game forever, and that's what this video is about. The most iconic men's fragrances that most guys don't actually appreciate how much of a game changer that some of these were, that actually led to the creation of some of our favorites later on. So hopefully it's going to be an educational video. Let's go through these 5 fragrances today. Let's start off this video with the perfume molecule of Cologne, the fragrance molecule that was discovered in the 60s by Pfizer whilst they were trying to research a drug that would work as a depressant in the ketone family. They ended up developing diazepam, or Valium as we all know it nowadays, in America anyways, and on the way there they accidentally made Cologne, which was also called watermelon ketone. It is the reason that aquatic fragrances exist, and this was one of the first fragrances that utilized this, one of the first pioneers. Davidoff's Cool Water. Created by Pierre Bourdon in 1988, smelling eerily similar to Green Irish Tweed, also made by the same perfumer a few years back. Bear in mind, guys, this was a revolutionary fragrance because back in the 70s and 80s, men's fragrances were all just green. They were just pure barbershop fougères. That was a traditional man scent. Perfumes or colognes weren't really much of a mainstay for men as they were for women, so that men back then, really compared to now, really weren't wearing perfumes. The market has grown rapidly since. So Cool Water coming along and still being a green fragrance, having some aromatic freshness there, but then injecting this aquatic note of Cologne, which creates a synthetic sea breeze effect to a fragrance, has sort of a watermelon effect in opening, then I say on a dry down it smells more like cucumber. So if you love fragrances like Nautica Voyage, you can thank Cool Water for that and for these perfumers pioneering the way for the use of Cologne. It's what created the pathway for these 90s fragrances that just filled up the entire of society with these aquatic notes. So fragrances like Calvin Klein's Escape, Acquadigio, or even any fragrance just with the name Aqua in general. The Cologne sort of smells a bit outdated now. It is more reminiscent with an earlier decade, a few decades back. So it's not as modern these days, so it's not as prominent, but it's still affected the genre. Still to this day, who doesn't love Dolce & Gabbana's Light Blue Intense, for example? All pioneered by this, very important. Is it still worth buying Davidoff Cool Water? I would say yes. If you're interested in the history of perfumery, it's dirt cheap and it's pleasant. It's very hard to hate this fragrance. By the way, guys, if you don't know already, our fragrance brand itself, Mr. Fragrant, our first release, has become a limited edition batch. So what we're doing for our brand is releasing 1 batch for each release and then moving on. So that keeps things fresh, creative, and we keep things progressing in the brand. So if you guys want to get your hands on it, Australia, Canada, UK, you're on your last batch. That's it. We're not making any more fragrance bottles for you guys. We have less than 100 in Australia and Canada, just over 100 in the UK. America, that's pretty much run out now, so I'm going to get just a little bit more, like a few hundred more, like 200 more, I think, for USA, and that'll be the last bottles for the USA. So if you guys want to experience Mr. Fragrant, our versatile offering, fresh, sexy, a little bit mature, more for guys who are 25 and plus. We take the blue fragrance DNA and flip it on its head, making it more natural, really recreating the concept of a blue fragrance. I also want to give a shout out to Mr. Smelly's latest release, Chypre Fulminare. This is Mr. Smelly's brand, Norton & Wilson, which is a brand meant more for the elegant gentleman. Very, very English smelling. This is made by the same perfumer who made our fragrance as well, John Stephen, who's a master perfumer, been working at the industry for over 50 years. This is dry, spicy tobacco with a floral touch to it. This is a really nice fragrance. Again, a very elegant gentleman should be wearing something like this. This is a Chypre-based perfume, so it has some headiness, some mossiness to here, a traditional gentleman scent brought into modern times, and the performance is fantastic. It's extremely long-lasting. I think Mr. Smelly has created one of his best releases so far. I will leave a link in the description down below for Chypre Fulminare as well. We're going to have a bit more of a chemistry lesson still, carrying on. So, as I said before, the 70s and 80s were a bit of an uncreative time for men's perfumery. Well, not strictly. I mean, generally, it was seen that men's perfumery had to go in one direction. It wasn't as expansive and as creative as now, as you know, today's fragrances, in my opinion. But it's difficult to know because obviously I didn't live in those times. But it seems like, as I said, the mainstay was fougères, barbershop, green scents for men. However, another fragrance revolutionized the game in the 80s for two reasons. This fragrance is leather-based and it smells very different to a fougere, and it also made ISO-E Super a mainstay in perfumery. ISO-E Super, for those of you who don't know, is related to the ionone family of chemistry, which is related to violet flowers in nature. It was developed in the early 70s by IFF, and then 15 years later, it was not going to be utilized in mainstay perfumery until this fragrance came out. Dior's Fahrenheit. As I mentioned before, this is nothing like the previous fougere era that came before it. Even to this day, Dior Fahrenheit has a lot of character. It's very distinct and still, and it's just insane how it stood the test of time. So as I said, it changed the style of perfumery that a lot of men went for, and it's also ended up using ISO-E Super as an overdose. Before this fragrance came out, ISO-E Super was used in minuscule amounts. People didn't know how to use it. It was this new aroma chemical. Of course, you guys know fragrances like what's it called? Molecular One exists, which is 100% ISO-E Super. But back then, this was 25% ISO-E Super, which is, insane. People thought like that was crazy. Nowadays, like Terre d'Hermès, I believe, has 55% ISO-E Super is what I read. So now, after this fragrance, people realize how pleasant ISO-E Super smells. If you don't know what it smells like a chemical. You can't really relate it to anything in nature. When you smell it pure, it smells like woody, musky suede with a nice amber finish to it. It creates a nice filler and a nice backbone for all perfumes. It's very easy to use. It's very versatile to use with all different ingredients. So most perfumes will have large amounts of it, and it gives the perfume a good longevity as well. It's one of the most prolific perfume ingredients in the world now, and it was all started from Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit itself has a green character to it. It has the violet leaf, which is sharp, pierces through and gives that petroleum effect to the fragrance. It has a leather base to it as well, overall still being fresh, extremely masculine, rugged, and extremely pleasant from the ISO-E Super. And speaking of Molecular One, here it is. Well, not really, this is Escentric One, but pretend it's Molecular One. Molecular One, released in 2006, was revolutionary. A single molecule perfume, that's it. It's just ISO-E Super. According to the perfumer, and again, it's a fragrance I'm a bit curious about, because why do you need a perfumer to put one chemical in there? But apparently, according to him, they use a special type of ISO-E Super. ISO-E Super is not a single molecule strictly. It's actually a mix of isomers, so different variants of ISO-E Super mixed together. Originally created by IFF, has now lots of different variants. So Molecular One is a variant of pure ISO-E Super, is what is claimed. Although on their official website, they just say it's ISO-E Super, plain and simple. So I'm a bit confused by that. And I'm also confused due to the fact that when I smelled it compared to my little tin canister of ISO-E Super that I bought on eBay, they smell very similar. So I know this company is making a great profit because ISO-E Super is dirt cheap and it's just one molecule, but it's been a massive success. It's been a massive hit, and it really takes society's views into a different direction. It seems like in the last few decades, perfumery has gone from being natural focused to being more synthetic molecule focused, and I think that trend is going to continue further on as we keep destroying nature, unfortunately, as ingredients and resources become more scarce. Perfumers, even like Francis Kurkdjian in one of his interviews, says that this is probably going to be the future of perfumery. But it goes to show that just having even one of these molecules discovered in the lab by accident is still extremely pleasant to the nose. It's literally that ISO-E Super that it's lasting you all day. It's pure ISO-E Super. A lot of people use it as a base to make other perfumes last longer. I'm not sure if you need to do that often because, as I said, a lot of perfumes now today in men's perfumery use high concentrations of ISO-E Super. So it'd be weird, for example, having Terre d'Hermès on top of ISO-E Super because there's already so much of it in there already. But it's good to know. It's a good fragrance to have Molecular One. Check it out if you haven't already. It's a minimalist perfume, some might say. Very interesting how it revolutionized things. Speaking of Francis Kurkdjian, let's discuss Jean-Paul Gaultier Le Male. Released in 1995, as I said, in the 70s and 80s, the Fougere family was king for men's perfumery. Now, fragrances like Cool Water and Fahrenheit went into a very different direction, but I think Francis Kurkdjian, at only the age of 25, which is insane that a fragrance like this revolutionized the industry from such a young person, 25, at the beginning of his career, went and took the Fougere family and flipped it on its head. He made an aromatic fragrance, so this has mint and lavender. It has that green aromatic backbone of a fougere fragrance that waves through the character's DNA. You smell it throughout the fragrance, but then it's enveloped in a lot of sweetness. He took a clean, serious fougere family, you know, the barbershop style of perfumery, and made it a lot more fun, playful, with sweet cinnamon and vanilla. Warm, inviting, sexy, playful. It's an extremely loud fragrance back in the day, something you'd wear in the clubs, for example. And this just really shows the creativity and the genius of Francis Kurkdjian. He says it in his interview, which I'll link in the description as well if you guys want to read. It's very interesting. He likes to approach perfumery in a way where he roots himself in the foundations, in what is traditional, but then he wants to also flip things on their heads by connecting himself to modern times and creating something new, which you can also see in other creations he made, like Baccarat Rouge, which is also another revolutionary perfume. This stuff does not happen by accident. So Bleu Mal, although it's not as strong as it used to be, I still think it's a classic, and it's still a masterpiece to this day. And finally, let's go back to Dior and back to another chemistry lesson, because you guys love chemistry. Who doesn't? Sorry, I don't know why I'm sounding like Walter White. I look like him as well. No, anyways, back to the perfumes. Another extremely prevalent note in perfumery is Hedione. If you guys don't know what Hedione is, I think the full name is dihydrojasminate, which essentially, as it sounds, it refers to the fact that it's a constituent in jasmine. So it's one of the notes in jasmine, Hedione. Jasmine itself is a beautiful flower. It's one of the most ancient perfume notes ever used. Even the ancient Egyptians used it. It has a nice, heady, floral, sweet, fruity, honeyed effect to it. It also has an animalic effect to it. Jasmine contains the constituent called indole, and indole gives a fecal note to jasmine, and we know this for sure because indole is also found in human feces, hence the link there. However, jasmine is beautiful because it's also balanced out by other constituents like Hedione, which gives a fragrance an airiness, a freshness, and it gives a fragrance a lot of longevity as well, similar to Isoe Super. It's not a coincidence that Isoe Super and Hedione are both very prevalent in most perfumes these days. As someone who dabbles in amateur perfumery, I can tell you they're both extremely useful perfume notes. Hedione was discovered in the early 60s by Firmenich, and then a few years later it was used in mainstream perfumery at a puny concentration of 2.5%. So it seemed like a really high amount at that time because, again, when these new aroma chemicals come out, people don't know what to do with them. I don't have the bottle here, but it is Dior Eau Sauvage, the original in 1966, which takes, you know, a citrus, fresh fougere and mixes it with Hedione, giving a light floral effect to the fragrance. Hedione, as I said, adds to a fragrance by making all the other ingredients shine a lot more. It makes a fragrance more airy, more radiant. It works especially well with other floral notes, and it gives good longevity, as I said. Similar to Isoe Super, it's used as a filler, and it's revolutionary that Eau Sauvage was one of the first fragrances to use it, and it paved the way for other perfumers to amp up the dose a lot more later on, like in today's modern perfumery. Watch any video by Aaron Terence Hughes. He tells you pretty much everything. He can smell like Isoe Super and the Hedione, which, yeah, just add a lot of versatility and usefulness to the modern perfume game. Both Isoe Super and Hedione are very cheap and very versatile, so it's a no-brainer why they're both used so much. And that concludes the video, guys. What did you think? Did you enjoy our chemistry lesson today in today's YouTube lab? Do you guys want to see more of this kind of content? I'm trying to make these videos a lot more educational, so we're not just talking about fragrances from a mainstream perspective, but you guys are learning something new as well as we go along. If you guys want to see more of this kind of content, please give some feedback down below. Tell me how you would want to see things improved, or you want me to just carry on. What other topics would you guys like to see? Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.